Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. I can't believe
that. Good time of day, everyone. Welcome to episode 186 of Americans Watching the Footy. Holy cow, we've gotten up to that number very quickly. That means our next episode's a special one. What's special about 187? Murder. Oh yeah, I guess that's a California thing. I think that's in multiple states. Is it just a California thing? I think it's just California based on what I'm looking up right now. See, y'all already learned something. I am Benjamin Castle, and the one who reminded us of the significance of the number 187 in our home state is my older brother, Ethan. That's right. I'm coming to you from South San Francisco, California, right next to Brian Harambe. I am in San Diego, right next to, my microphone. Hot. Hopefully we don't have any hot mic incidents. Oh, fuck, why did I say that?
It wasn't much, but I wanted to get a fucking penalty against Nashville early in the...
That feels like an especially relevant clip since the Stanley Cup Finals just ended and America beats Canada, make it 31 in a row. An American team has won the Canadian Football League championship more recently than a Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup. And American teams have not played in the CFL since 1995, that year that the Baltimore Stallions won the Grey Cup. Do you realize what sort of havoc the non-existent rumored LA AFL team could have wreaked on the world? Still an opportunity. I hope we can inflict a greater sporting loss upon Canada this week. And that has nothing to do with soccer and everything to do with the fact that, isn't Andrew McGrath Canadian? He is. He was born in Mississauga, which is right near Toronto. Yeah, and we all know Canada's national pride hinges solely on Andrew McGrath's performance. So if he wins, it's a great day for Canada and therefore the world. And if he loses, it's a terrible day for Canada and therefore the world. Before we actually get into breaking down these games, I have identified 3 candidates for the most cracking game of the round. And I was wondering if you had a top tier or a single game that you think is the most cracking, because I'm trying to decide between these multiple candidates. I think Friday night's coming in pretty strong. Both teams just outside the 8 and coming off wins. They're extremely tough. Road test, obviously, for Melbourne, so that's very much a prove-it game there. Sydney and Freo, you got first versus fifth, and hopefully a more even-keeled playing group for the Dockers, considering what they had to endure right before their last meeting. And for a third one in there, I guess country game? I actually don't really put the Friday night game in that mix. I put the middle Saturday game in there. It's just a reminder, with all the overlaps, we only get 2 true standalone games around, which sucks. We're not fans of that. And I'm especially not a fan because I'm going to be kind of busy this weekend. So I will be catching up on some of the games. We're going to record our round recap a night later than usual. And like a good chunk of that recap is going to be just Benjamin talking or asking me what I thought about a game. And I'll say, I don't know, I haven't watched it yet.
I don't know. I never thought I'd get this far.
If I'm through like 5.5 or 6 of the 9 games by the time we record, I will consider that a success. There are only 1 or 2 other rounds out of these remaining 9 where I'll be compromised at all. So this will be a not very common thing, but it is something that is going to happen this week. So just a programming note there. What makes you see the Friday Nighter as less cracking than I see it? Is the venue a big part in that? Not so much that, and just I'm really low on the Demons right now. So that Friday Nighter, Brisbane hosting Melbourne at the Gabba, typical Friday night time slot, 2:40 a.m. Pacific, 5:40 a.m. Eastern, 7:40 p.m. local. It's on FS2. I'll be on Eastern time. Lions up to 10th. They are 7-6-1 after smashing Port Adelaide on the road. The Demons, after holding on against North, they're in 9th at 8-6. These teams have played a lot lately, including round 5 this year, a 22-point Lions win at the Gabba that wasn't even that close. But I think back to the meetings between these teams last year, not just the big Demons comeback, but of course, one moment in particular when they played at the Gabba.
Oh no! Oh no!
The Lions did a lot of good work off set plays from clearance in round 5, and I'll be looking for that again, especially with Melbourne being down their best or second best player for the rest of the year.
Definitely their best midfielder.
And he wasn't even in the midfield full time.
Was that his 5-goal game?
No, that was the round 9 loss to the Blues.
All right, that makes sense. I feel like if he had kicked 5 goals on a night where as a team they only kicked 8, that would have been something you would have mentioned already.
Yeah, he kicked 5 on a night where Melbourne kicked 11. The Lions had 6 players with 43 or fewer games of AFL experience against the Power. I imagine that number is going to stay the same because the quick and easy change would probably be Shadow Brain out for Will Ashcroft, who does look ready to return from his torn ACL rehab.
Dare I say he looked ready to do?
Dedicated listeners will appreciate that. I mean, this is just terrifying, though, that you've got this young mix already so well integrated and playing important roles. I mean, Fletcher played in the grand final last year. Morris and Reville haven't missed a beat. Morris was the Rising Star nominee. Wilmot hasn't missed a game since debuting in the 2022 Eliminator against Richmond. It's insane.
Yeah, I'm not excited about the D's heading into this game simply because even when they were up big on North, I didn't think they played very well. I'm just very down on them from a vibe standpoint, a talent standpoint, and everything except Max Gawn standpoint, and I guess Alex Neil-Boland and maybe Stephen May. Also, I said earlier this year, I really couldn't see the Lions losing a third home game, and then they lost a third home game. I really can't see them losing a fourth. This is another of the Mr. Burns, 9 misfortunes moments.
But 9 misfortunes? I'd like to see that.
But, I genuinely, and I am not saying this to jinx anything, I do not see them losing another home game, except, do they have the Swans at home? That could happen. Yeah, they still have the Swans at home. The only way I could see them not winning this game would be if something that I worried about after the 0-3 start comes true, where it's you're playing really well and you've expended all this energy just to get back towards getting over 500, and then it's tough to get all the way there. Just putting yourselves in position cost a lot of energy. That I could see.
Some problems for the Demons, though, in that Christian Salem is dealing with a knee injury, and so even if he does play, it probably isn't going to be 100%. I put it more toward the probable side for now, but he was a piece that you could consider going through the midfield more, so I imagine instead that responsibility would continue to fall on Trent Rivers and maybe a bit of Tom Sparrow as well. Maybe starting Sparrow a bit further back at times could work there. We do have a debut, though, confirmed for the Demons, that being Andy Moniz Wakefield. He is from their Next Generation Academy from their Northern Territory area, so shame that he couldn't have gotten in a little sooner to play in Alice. But as you're looking for some of the defenders to push downfield and into the middle, nice to have another halfback that you can rely on.
What do the D's have to do to win this? I mean, I guess the other thing is just you left out Shadow Brain, you lose. But what is the recipe for a Melbourne win? Is it a ton of intercept marks plus Danaher kicking 1-5?
Are you saying that it has to be more Brisbane losing and playing into the known commodities than Melbourne actually taking agency themselves?
I personally can't see a scenario where the D's are just better.
I think there were some things to watch for in terms of getting back to a more familiar play style in a couple ways against North, because you had more of a crowding of the skinnier side of the ground. And with Jake Lever coming back, maybe that'll allow Stephen May to have more of a roaming and rebounding assignment. So that'll be a big watch there. And then obviously the tall forwards need to lift in a way that they really haven't this year. Good luck stopping Harris Andrews and Jack Payne, but that's necessary. I do see the Lions winning this, but I'll be able to have a much greater perspective on Melbourne after this game based on how they're able to approach this sort of game plan. Currently, the Lions are listed as 30.5-point favorites on Bovada.
That's actually right around what I tipped them to win by. I think I put like 29.
The question is how much Brisbane keep their foot on the gas if they do get out to a lead. Their percentage is pretty good, 122.1. That is the second best in the league.
One last thought on this game. Win or lose, I think there should be a lot of attention given to how Clayton Oliver plays because he really hasn't done much this year. And if he was to turn it around and start playing better, I think it would put the Demons in a much better position. And if he plays well and they lose by 2 to 3 goals, I'll be much more positive about them than I was coming into this game.
Would you expect Jared Berry to go to Oliver? Or do you think it might be better for him to try and stop Finey at the source?
Great question. I was actually kind of thinking, what about just send him to Neil Bullen?
He's definitely a tertiary player there. I would expect it to be one of the two main ones because Berry has been able to somewhat limit source midfielders like Jack Steele, and that type of assignment's pretty common for him. Maybe trying to force Neil Bullen onto him more could put him under the pump and test his endurance. 5 games on Saturday. Welcome back, I guess.
I don't love this because, again, less overlap footy means more footy to watch. And especially after watching a bunch of games in real time versus on delay, I have a lot more fun watching games in real time and reacting with people and just, you get a better feel for momentum and the flow of the game and stuff in real time.
I almost wonder that if you're trying to watch things on replay, when it goes to the quarter breaks, would it be better to just pause it for 5 minutes or so at each quarter time and then give yourself a nice long halftime to space things out? Or do you just want to get through it then?
I just want to watch footy, but I will time bathroom breaks.
The Bulldogs will play under the roof again, and they've yet to play North this year. I think this might be the last double up to have its first meeting as the Kangas host the Dogs technically. This will be 1:45 p.m. local, of course. For Americans, 11:45 p.m. Eastern, 8:45 p.m. Pacific, Friday night, 18th versus 11th. The 22nd straight head-to-head meeting at Marvel Stadium between these two sides.
It's weird that the Dogs go down to Tasmania to face Hawthorn so regularly, but not North.
Is there some sort of history tied to Launceston involving the Bulldogs?
Not that I know of.
I don't know of any either.
Last year, these teams only met once. It was a 21-point Dogs win where they kicked 15-15. Didn't pull away until the second half. Cody Wakeman kicked 6 goals. Marcus Bonampelli kicked 3 and got best on ground. But there's a chance he's not available for this game. Hurt his back at training on Wednesday.
As you would know from personal experience, Ethan, back spasms are a bitch.
Yeah, back spasms are awful. If you ever wanted to be in so much pain that you literally cannot tie your shoes because bending over is miserable, that's how you do that. Even before I knew that, I was kind of thinking there is absolutely a sickos version of this where North wins this game.
A couple weeks ago, you would have said, oh yeah, just manage whoever here. Now there's no clear team against whom you just automatically manage, with everyone going better at this point, except I guess Road Eagles could still be the exception, and Road Suns if you're really buying into that. So it might be a watch for the Bulldogs with Bontempelli in question, but they've still got plenty of the midfield depth, of course. Maybe it would be a bit more responsibility for Ed Richards, and I know neither of us would mind that at all. The Bulldogs will also be getting Sam Darcy back from his dangerous tackle suspension. I would imagine automatically that puts Rory Lopp under the pump by no fault of his own, which is kind of weird to say. If Bontempelli is out, to whom would you send Will Phillips?
Probably Bailey Dale, I guess, because Libba, I don't see him stopping Libba from racking up the clearances.
Phillips is more of a center square player, though. My thought was Adam Trollmore.
Okay, that could work too.
Dale would be someone who a James Jordan type going to. That would make sense, but not sure if Phillips has the tagging chops yet for that sort of an assignment.
North could have a really complete defense this week with Callum Dawson back from his dangerous tackle suspension. I was a big fan of Jackson Archer last week. I've hyped up Dawson at times. You know, I like Charlie Combin, who just signed an extension. I mean, so does everybody. Colby McKercher and Griffin Logue are probably another VFL appearance away, but getting closer. So this is a team that, you know, like holding opponents under 100, they've done it a couple times now. It's like less far-fetched. And then Toby Pink might be out with an ankle injury. It's funny because at the start of the year, like all of the optimism surrounding their defense was about him. And then he wasn't good. And then he got moved to forward. And a bunch of other guys have been good.
Well, we had still thought of Charlie Coleman as a ruck forward at that point. I think Callum Coleman-Jones going down contributed to that idea even more. And yeah, Coleman has been this rock in defense.
Was it one of the assistant coaches or who that really made this, that helped Coleman make this adjustment? Because whoever has helped him make this development should be given a lot of praise. Or whoever just noticed, hey, you're really good at this, we should play you here. Because even when they were getting their asses kicked earlier this year, like his progress has been such a nice development for them and a really good reason to be optimistic about the future of this club. And I think my tone has changed a lot about North in the last few weeks. And I want to give a disclaimer, there's a world where they just get out-talented and get absolutely blasted, and they only win, I don't know, 1 or 2 more games the rest of the year, if even that. But just these last couple games, through them being more competitive, you're starting to see what it looks like when a bunch of the pieces come together.
How much would that optimism be tempered if they return to their more expected Northness?
I mean, it depends on which pieces perform. If you have a bunch of good individual defensive performers, yet go back to giving up triple digits, then you worry about structural stuff. If it's like teams just shut down Larkey and the other forward struggles, so be it. I mean, like, Curtis Taylor's played pretty well the last couple weeks, so if he was to take a step back, wouldn't be like the most astonishing thing.
Cam Zurhar's been on it a bit more as well. Hopefully he can keep that going and hopefully he can stay.
I can't be the only one who sees this as like a game that the Bulldogs can 100% lose. Like, it would just be on brand, especially with they'd played a couple of really good games before the bye.
It's type of thought that makes sense with the type of extremely high ceiling and yet fairly low floor team that they are. You always have the worry about trap games. I'm not sure, is trap game a term that you see also in Australia, or do they have like another equivalent for it?
Ooh, I don't know, but that makes me wonder. Without knowing if there actually is a term for it, what could they call it? It's got to be like some funny figure of speech.
I don't know. I'm not here to fuck spiders.
Well, I'm going to guess, and this is completely a guess, that in Australia, they call it a Marmaduke.
And I base that on absolutely nothing.
You know, it seems like one of those names that originated off of something that happened one time, kind of like Falcon.
Which it feels like it's taken on more of a life in Australian football than in rugby.
Which is pretty funny. Dogs favored by 36.5. I'd be willing to knock this down about 9 to 10 points.
Are you going more toward like a mean or median versus a mode?
Yes, I think about like the squiggle ladder predictor and how it has like the curve kind of with all the possible outcomes of each game. I'm thinking of like the height of that curve being around the like 30-ish point window. Although I'm looking on Squiggle and it looks like it's out higher than that, towards like 50. But I think that's because it looks at full season instead of like just what North's done these last few weeks.
I mean, their last couple of weeks, when taken just kind of as a sample without regard to sequencing, yeah, they would look like anomalies. By the way, probably a good time to mention, there seems like 2 main suitors now for Bailey Smith. Easter Monday.
That makes sense.
The thought of Bailey Smith in the Hawthorn midfield is it terrifying? I'm not sure.
I think Geelong's best thing to sell to him is like, you don't want to be an outside player, right? We can ensure that. Although he does look like he'd fit with Hawthorn just visually. And the idea of him and Jack Ginnivan together, like from a media standpoint, would be hysterical and probably very stupid and very toxic, but also like pretty funny. Our other game in that time slot, Sydney hosting Freo at the SCG, 11:45 a.m. for those of you in Perth. I will mention, it's kind of fun comparing like which game, ends up faster than the other, and it's really just off of which one has more goals typically. And I would think it's more likely that this game ends a couple minutes ahead of the Dogs in North. This is another Fox Soccer Plus game, and let me check to see which one's actually on live. I can't imagine like anyone in our audience pays for Fox Soccer Plus, but I actually, you know what? Through like streaming packages and stuff, it's possible. Fox Soccer Plus will be showing the Swans game live.
And the Dogs game will be delayed until 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on Saturday.
And Swans and Dockers game will be preceded by yet another showing of Rover of Tobruk, which I just had on again in the background. Honestly, it's a really good short little documentary. It's kind of funny just that they show it so many times, but it is good.
I also find it funny that it's shown before and after so many games that don't involve Port. This is first versus fifth, the 13-1 Swans and the 8-5-1 Dockers. Freo had won 4 straight meetings since late 2021, but round 9 was obviously an incredibly difficult circumstance for them, playing the night after Cam McCarthy's death. It felt off to have that game played then. And yet, in terms of the volume of scores themselves, the Dockers kept up. It was just they were incredibly inaccurate. It was their third worst accuracy in the club's history, kicking 415 plus 7 kicks out on the full. The vibes were just off in general, and it was
the vibe definitely off. But like, if you just watched the actual football without the context, you would have just thought, damn, they had played pretty well and just didn't kick straight.
It was interesting how much Freo just stuck to their guns and looked to the corridor at every opportunity, despite Sydney being prepared and having numbers there. I want to see how they might adjust that. And Hayden Young and Jordan Clark will be central figures there because they're the types who can change angles of attack. Maybe this is also a time for Jeremy Sharp to get some more involvement after his general numbers, his volume of possessions and involvements has been down since the bye.
Considering the shape of the SCG, it makes sense. I think it's just a ground that's conducive to more wing play in general. And I think that benefits Freo, and I can see why they've had success not only at the SCG, but head-to-head with the Swans altogether.
Sharp and Clark going up with Golden and McInerney whets my appetite for this game.
One of our mutual friends and fantasy league combatant, Gil Griffin, asked during that game, is there a such thing as composed pressure because Sydney's is manic, but without looking manic? But I think the Dockers are a team that with the way they play generally can handle that. I do worry a bit about how they handle it in the back. That's something that will probably largely fall on Luke Ryan, and it probably would have been that way even before Alex Pierce got hurt.
His injury was thought of as potentially season-ending. There were fears that maybe he had 2 breaks, but it's one forearm fracture that will keep him out 3 to 4 weeks. That will mean obviously more one-on-one responsibility for everybody else. Luke Ryan is the one that most people will be watching. But remember, Hugh Davies did a decent job in his man assignments without registering the touches for it in his debut last week.
And I think that while there's always a threat of Logan McDonald or Joel Amarty going off, this is the sort of opponent that you feel better about going up against without that cornerstone to your tall defense, because so much of their scoring and production comes out of kind of that midfield forward mix with guys like Heaney and Warner.
And don't forget Tom Papley, who loves a goal.
I don't know which guy exactly will be tasked with that. Maybe is that Brandon Walker as he comes back in from his illness, or who lines up there?
That's a good question. I forgot to mention earlier also James H as one of those wing players there with good endurance. So maybe he could have a bit more of a running with assignment for an outside player.
He had a couple of kicks in that win over the Suns last week that were just awesome to watch.
I think a lot of the responsibility is going to fall on Hayden Young to take on one of Heaney or Warner because he's got the running and tagging ability. So maybe a down game in terms of touches and more of a defensive affair for him.
And that could be a Terrell Pryor problem because I think Hayden Young is so essential to their structure and how they move through the middle. Yes, you could offset some of that by going to the outside, but I think he's so vital. I mean, knowing the way this team prioritizes defense, I would think they won't hesitate too much with that, but I think it's something that should at least be in the back of the coach's minds. I will still be tipping the Swans to win this game.
Of course.
I'd be tipping them to win every game except maybe their trip to the GABA, but I see how this could absolutely be a game that Frio wins. With their ability to withstand pressure, with the combination of Jackson and Darcy being one of the best chances to stand up to Grundy.
I did not realize I looked on the AFL tipping website and holy cow, 97% to the Swans.
Yeah, that surprised me. I thought it would have been more like 90. But again, I said my logic here is this seems like a game that the Swans are more likely to lose than most of their others. Because just style-wise, it would fit. And the Dockers, some weeks they go out on the road and get absolutely smashed, and some weeks they go out and look really good. Now, I think the most likely outcome is the Swans win by about 38-40 because they're just playing better and they're just too good. And they do their usual thing and go on a run and pull away. But I could see a really wide range of potential outcomes that culminate in a Frio win. I could see them winning by a couple points. I could see them winning by multiple goals. And the most I could see them winning by is about 20 points. Whereas I think almost every Swans win in this is between 20 and 40 points, probably more towards 40, because that's just kind of what they've been doing.
With Brandon Walker coming back in, I think it's also going to be a much more man-oriented role for one of my favorite players to watch this past weekend in general when it comes to Frio's defense. Probably a steadier defensive 50 role, you'd think, for Heath Chapman.
You know what? Here's my thought with Heath Chapman. If they win this game, he's going to play a large part between withstanding pressure, because we've seen him pretty slick by hand and by foot, and in actual one-on-one defending.
If they lose,
he could still have a decent role. I don't see a scenario where they win without him being heavily involved.
Gold Coast and Collingwood tend to play after the byes during these winter school holidays.
I never really understand Australia's school holiday schedule and stuff. It always feels like there's one.
Well, this is really their winter break now, so
that doesn't really coincide with any particular celebration or observance, though, does it?
Doesn't need to. Summer break doesn't really do that here. It's just...
I mean, it kind of does. I mean, a lot of places, school is either out by Memorial Day or back in just after Labor Day, whereas our winter break is Christmas and New Year and stuff, which, that's a winter thing here.
So this is right at the start, I guess, of the Queensland school holidays, and Victoria and WA are starting pretty much that day, I think. So that explains why this matchup is held around this time so much. All three of the highest attendances at what we now know as People First Stadium were against Collingwood during school holidays, and the third highest of those was last year, despite some flights being canceled, and it was never a game. You remember the 2022 meeting, how fun that was?
Yeah, that was awesome. That was
was it a Josh Dacos goal that won that?
I don't recall, but it was either right before or after the Noah Anderson after the siren goal.
Oh, it was Will Hoskett-Elliott with the last goal. Josh Dacos had one of the two right before.
It was the week before Noah Anderson's goal.
Oh my goodness. Last year, it was 120-42 in the Pies' favor. 4-0 for Collingwood in the first, 7-1 in the second. It was never really a game. And
who was coaching that game for the Suns? Was that still Stuart Dew?
I think it may have been his second to last game because he coached 16 games last year.
Yeah, I guess his last game would have been the week after at Port. Yeah, and then Stephen King came in for the game against the Saints.
Speaking of King, when it comes to the Suns, Ben King still has to pass fitness tests on his knee after missing out last week. The Suns were without both King and Jed Walter, and while Walter did well in the twos, it would be extremely tough to take out Sam Day after another 3-goal performance in the same vein as what happened after their stint in Darwin. Calf injuries are getting in the way a bit too for the Suns. Mal Rosas is still, I guess, not 100% from his calf injury in VFL rehab, and Brandon Ellis is going to be out 4 weeks after doing his sub stint, I guess. Now, Ellis being out and just some more flexibility in general makes me think you've got to get Braden Fiorini back in because his presence along the wing was sorely missed against Frio. If he were there, Jordan Clark would have not had a 5-bounce run. I can say that plain and simple.
That's like the one thing I'm really going to remember about that game, other than Sean Darcy outplaying Jared Witz.
And Josh Tracy trucking a dude.
No, honestly, I'm going to take this over that because, like, guys get trucked. How often do you get even a 4-bounce run?
Hey, Collingwood's been going pretty well. Oh, wait, they aren't even close to full health. That's terrifying.
Well, here's the issue. As they get healthier, it's like, who comes out? Who gets bumped around? Because I guess, you could take out one of Nathan Kruger or Reef McGinnis for Brody Majacek.
I would say Reef.
Finn McRae seems like one of the more likely ones. He got subbed out, and it was a you suck sub. Like you said, Brody Majacek's coming back. So Scott Pendlebury, which also lines up potentially his 400th game to be against Carleton, which is like already sold out. Maybe even some of the MCC members would show up for that.
Would we see the Saturday home and away record broken that quickly?
I think so.
So we have the 2 confirmed ins and then 3 potential probable ones with Jordan DeGoey, Oleg Markov, and Joe Richards all trending in the right direction. I think DeGoey and Richards you'd have to put in. I
love that Joe Richards has already gotten to that point. Like, that's such an underrated aspect of Collingwood this season. We can talk about Nick Dacos's insane run and how he's a 3-vote candidate like every week, but he doesn't win games by himself. No one player wins games by himself. And for so many players to have stepped up in light of injuries, between Richards and Lockie Sullivan and some of these others, that's a really good testament to this team's depth that was really never brought up during their flag run last year. Because, they largely had better health at those spots. And, all the attention was just on them winning close games, which, yeah, that's still a thing. But it's much less of like the sole talking point about them now.
Maybe Sullivan is in a bit of a difficult spot then, considering how he's helped make up for DeGoey. I do not envy, any selectors at AFL level, especially for Collingwood right now, with trying to keep the good things going while also knowing you have so much of your theoretical best 22, if not 18, ready to come back.
Counterpoint, I envy a couple of the ones at Geelong because there are decisions that they've been putting off that I would make very ruthlessly.
We'll get to those soon enough, Ethan. Let's just say for now, the Pies are 2.5-point favorites. I would bump this out, especially after this past week and knowing that Gold Coast have a tough time asserting their own game plan. Yes, they're at home. Yes,
they play better than they did before and after the bye. They can't be much worse.
This, I still think, is the week where that whole home road split thing starts to collapse.
I actually really like this being like a single-digit game. Here's the question. Which team is more likely to win this game comfortably?
I would still back Collingwood.
I think so, but I could see a scenario where the Suns do it. Watch for Noah Anderson to bounce back. Can't see him having back-to-back poor games.
Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
I'm going to do the minimalist version of the read. Twitter, Americans Footy. YouTube, Americans Footy. Instagram, Americans Footy. Me, Castle Media. Him, pointing, cat named Brian.
Me, pointing at myself, Benjamin HK01. There was a way to make that even more minimal. There was also the further minimal approach of trying to say them all within a quarter of a second.
Or you could just do it in the troll language, just point and grunt.
Anyone could speak troll.
But you know what inspired that.
Why waste time? Say lot word when few word do trick.
So going into the break, we had talked about the Suns, and coming out of the break, we're talking about the Crows, which seems like an appropriate time to note that Ned Moyle has signed on for 3 more years at Gold Coast, which some Crows fans think that's just a really bad reflection on their own like list management and recruiting. I mean, does he just love being on the coast? Or is it that he expects Jared Witz to fall off or something? Or what? I don't know, but I don't know how the Crows front office didn't do more to make this happen. It is not a good reflection on Justin Reed. I can tell you that for sure.
Well, Jared Witz is at this point 31, and the Crows have a part of their ruck mix hopefully set looking ahead. Now, it looks like he's going to be playing in the Sandful this week, that being Riley Philthorpe.
I saw one of the many AFL pages I follow suggesting that now maybe the Crows try to like give the bag to Sam Draper.
Interesting thought. From Match Simulation today, this is from Matt Turner, part of the Super Footy cohort. He says that Riley O'Brien and Elliot Himmelberg were playing with the A group in Match Sim, and Mark Keane, Kieran Strawn, Sam Berry, and Brody Smith were all with the B team. So maybe that's some insight there. I would be surprised to see Keane get...
Yeah, I was going to say none of those others would surprise me, but Keane, that's interesting. But with one of those pieces of news, I guess then this game could be the
Himmel Bowl.
Yes. Adelaide hosting GWS at Adelaide Oval as part of our Saturday night twin bill. I mean, it's not a double header. It's just kind of a... What would you even call it? A 2-for-1? A good time to be wall-eyed? I don't fucking know.
A double screener?
Yeah, sure.
Double screener. There you go. 7 p.m. local time, 7:30 p.m. for the Pacific states in Australia. For America, it's 5:30 a.m. Eastern, 2:30 a.m. Pacific. This will be going up against the country game. And this one I'm interested in because of the drama in the meetings last year, both of which the Giants won, but they did not come easy. The Crows did their typical thing of wasting dominant stretches, especially early on. You saw that in round 1, which was a ridiculously hot day in New South Wales. I also remember that game because that was when Shane McAdam fucking clocked Jacob Ware.
Yeah, it seemed like one of the things about last year that I thought was going to be one of the more memorable things about the Giants season was that it felt like the whole league had a bounty on Jacob Ware to start the year, and then they just went on an awesome run and were really good. And that includes a 14-point win at the Adelaide Oval in round 18. Yet another game where the Crows couldn't finish it off. They were somewhat wasteful of dominant stretches, not as badly as when they kicked 12-18 in the loss at GWS, but they got outscored 32-1 in the fourth quarter.
I remember Josh Fahey came in as the sub and had a really good impact, kicked a goal then. That was one of Toby Green's more active games through the middle, and Josh Kelly fought through the Ben Keys tag. I would say that's a tag that the Crows will probably try again because Kelly is the more natural type tag there. So let's see if Ben Keys has learned a lesson or two, and let's see if the Crows could try and shed that sort of heartbreak reputation that they had last year, because 7 of their 12 losses I categorized as heartbreakers, in which they kicked a combined 74 goals, 101 behinds.
That was a game that also went up against a Geelong Essendon game, one that I remember very fondly. I remember only really watching the very end of this live and then going back, and I think this game in particular was one of the ones that reminded me, big sound on the road after a win is way better than at home. Because there's like 2 people cheering, and it's just an awesome troll song.
It's going to be really fun hearing that after the final siren of a grand final at some point.
Especially because, you know, if you win the grand final, they play your song like 1 billion times. I wish we were around for the 2019 wave of big sound memes.
Hey, now that Largo's gone, we can play the forbidden music.
Anyway, let's not act like this game is a foregone conclusion. As bad as things are with the Crows, this could totally be the where the hell was this all along game. Maybe I just had it against the wrong Sydney team. Although I will say, they did outscore Joel Amartey a couple weeks ago. They beat him. They didn't beat the whole Swans, but they beat one guy. Not by a lot. But things are getting not quite dire for the Giants, but as well as they started the year, you know, down at 6th, going to still be without Sam Taylor. assuming he plays, we'll probably find out just how much of an impact Stephen Canelio will have, because he hadn't been playing tremendous football before his injury. He had been okay, but only a couple times this year did I really think he was that good. And a version of this GWS team that is among like the 4 best teams in this thing. And, if we're maintaining that there are 3 clear top teams and it's kind of wide open for 4th, there is totally a world where they return to form after a mid-season swoon and become that 4th. But it has to involve him being a lot better, right?
I would imagine so, and a greater variety of forward success. Now, Max Krzyzewski kicked 2 goals on debut last week, but Aaron Cadman showed well after his demotion. I don't like just immediately taking guys in and out again. I think give Krzyzewski.
That's how you get Rita Brown.
I don't think they're going to go for a Kad Shevminski. So forward selection will be a point of intrigue for me in terms of both teams, because you have Krzyzewski in there, Cadman, along with pick 12 Phoenix Gothard, making the case in the VFL. Nice to see Gothard having recovered from mono and getting into form. Connor O'Sullivan's friend, I must say that. Meanwhile, for the Crows, Taylor Walker is likely to be back, was subbed off hurt round 13. And as we mentioned going into this game, there's a chance for a Himmel Bowl.
Walker hasn't had an especially great year, starting to show a few signs of age.
Darcy Fogarty has stepped up in the meantime, keeping up that multi-goal streak. That, I think, is at 7 games.
And not only that, he's a totally different role than Walker. He's more of like a hybrid, gets on the end of some, but can also set guys up.
How much do you think the Crows will actually lean into their younger group this week? Maybe give Dan Curtin another shot. Zach Taylor's been a name that's been thrown around for a while, maybe as much as Billy Dowling is this point.
I don't think so. I think we heard much more about Dowling, or at least we've talked about Dowling much more. My guess is they don't do it just yet. We didn't hear anything about Curtin being in the upper group. And, with Zach Taylor, it's just, he's got it tough because I'm not sure if he's also coaching the Cincinnati Bengals or if he's just the one who's going to die for Millard Fillmore to take his place. Speaking of Taylor, no Sam still.
Exploded Nuts Syndrome kind of does that.
Yeah. Jack Buckley struggled this past week. I expect he bounces back because he's played well without Taylor in the past. We'll need to do that again. I'm going to declare the Himmel Bowl as Harry's last chance to really turn it around. It seems like the perfect narrative and game for him to do it, right? I think this line is way too low. Giants are favored by 2.5. I'd bring this out at least 2 goals. Even though, again, I could totally see the Crows just having like their game where everything finally clicks.
It would make sense for it to be at home.
That's what I've maintained all along. Looking at the curve here on Squiggle, some of the models actually seem to predict a Crows win. I can't see this being a close Crows win. If they win, I feel like they really turn it on and it's the where was this all year game. Whereas GWS could win a close one or blow them out.
Honestly, don't be shocked if that Adelaide Revelation game is in 2 weeks and they just break through the shackles of Ross Ball.
I don't know about that.
There's a weirdness to that could totally work there. Well, Adelaide and GWS goes right up against a nighttime country game, excuse me. Also, I just find it weird that, the country game in and of itself is just this huge MCG affair and it's not, taken to one of the regional venues.
Yeah, I
feel like you got to do
like Ballarat or Echuca.
Ballarat would be, the easy one there. I'd like to see some stuff though, right around the Murray River. Maybe take a game or two out toward Echuca Moama or Albury Wodonga. They take a BBL game to Lavington each year, I think.
I've heard so many hilarious things about Echuca that I really want to see what it's like.
Maybe part of it is just shrines to Ollie Wines, Clayton Oliver, and Andrew Walker.
I get the idea of having a country game. Shouldn't it be at the Sydney Showground, the petting zoo?
Good point there.
Like, realistically, though, it's the idea of getting people from kind of the outskirts to come into the city. They should do, like, one of those and one that's actually out there. But Geelong and Essendon, 7:30 p.m. I'll be watching at 5:30 a.m. in Miami. It'll be on the West Coast at 2:30 a.m. It's Fox Sports 2. Cats are in 7th, 8-6 after losing to Carlton. Bombers 9-4-1 after beating the Eagles. They sit in 3rd. Geelong have won 6 straight head-to-head, including a pair last year. Tom Hawkins had 4 in the first quarter, 6 by halftime, and 8 for the game as he murked Brandon Zerk-Thatcher. Then he kicked another 5 when they made the Bombers actually go down the highway, and it was funny. Like, you know, the discourse going into that game was like, this game's too big to be played at Geelong. Whoa. And then after like a quarter, it was a mix of, well, okay, this was the right decision, or, yeah, they should have put this at the MCG because 80,000 people deserve to see Geelong go up 47-1 after a quarter. Now, keep in mind, I don't really have it in for Essendon. I like them more than any of the other big Victorian clubs, but that whole discourse was pretty fun. So yeah, Hawkins kicked 5, Mark Blicavs was awesome regardless of what his stats showed, and Brian Myers got screwed out of Brownlow votes in his 100th game.
Was that the Messi affair?
I think it had happened sometime leading up to that, because I know he had a bunch of friends and family wearing the shirts.
You also have this being the Scott sibling session, adding some more intrigue there, just how much can the twins understand each other's styles. And I'm fascinated with seeing the difference in this matchup between last year and this. Let's just start by saying this is the first time in ages that Essendon is favored going into a game against Geelong. We see him now as 1.5 point favorites as we record this on Wednesday.
It helps that they won't have to deal with Tom Hawkins, even though, you know, he's shown his age. He has given Essendon a lot of trouble, and even if, you know, in a hypothetical game where he was playing, he didn't score a bunch, I think he would be able to occupy Ben Mackay, which would help.
Now, would you see that task going to Gary Rowan?
I can still see it being Shannon Neal, although I just hope they don't try to make him copy Hawkins, because they're very different players. Different body types. First off, what I really realized last week, and I mean, it's always been known that Tom Hawkins is just a big, strong, heavy dude. Like, watching people struggle to chair him off was really funny. His legs are just fucking huge. He's just got, like, tree trunks for legs. And then Shannon Neal, I think of as, you know, even though as bad as his hands have looked at times, he moves really well despite his size. He's a serviceable backup ruck option, and he's got a lot of skill at ground level, like with handball stuff and being able to crumb and soccer. So I just hope they don't try to like squish him into the exact same job as Hawkins.
That isn't something that I think Chris Scott would do. It was a tough game last week for a couple of the Irishmen, Mark O'Connor and Oisin Mullen. O'Connor did his best Iggy Pop and was just a total passenger.
It's redundant to have both of them in, especially if you're going to have Mullen as a tagger. I don't know if they even bother tagging Merritt. This has been one of the teams, ironically, that's been more hesitant to tag when everyone else has done it more. But I don't think it's like an obvious, oh my God, you have to tag, kind of like with Caleb Sarong last year, where it was very obvious. You could also make a case for going after Jai Caldwell because he's been a clearance machine.
Or maybe even Sam Durham?
Durham and Archie Perkins, who have really driven the physical element for Essendon this year, are the biggest reason I'm much more apprehensive of this game than I have been of previous matchups.
I would expect Matt Guelphy to have the Tom Stewart assignment. That seems very fitting considering how we've seen Stewart struggle when he's gotten that attention and Guelphy being successful against players like Lachie Whitfield. Matt Guelphy and Jake Kelly taking on big assignments in each 50 are things to watch out for. And so I would imagine Kelly would go to probably Tyson Stengel.
Also, as much as I like Guelphy, he does totally look like a dude who would be tasked with getting under your skin and be really good at it. A little bit of a Draco Malfoy-ish look to him.
So is Darcy Moore his dad?
Possibly.
We're still not over Darcy Moore not going the Lucius Malfoy route on Mad Monday last year. Oh shit, also Jade Gresham should be back in for actually his 150th. So, wow, that's quite a group there going from midfield into the forward 50. It can be tough to manage the taller side of that then, with Nate Caddy being a late in this past week for Todd Goldstein. How do you manage that side of things there?
Yeah, Caddy looked good and doesn't just deserve to be dropped.
We said that after his first game, though, with Dreamtime.
Here's a tough challenge that I think could be a metric of success in this game. Whichever of Brad Close and Jade Gresham gets more touches, that team probably wins. One other thing that we have me think of with Lucius Malfoy and Darcy Moore, I need him to go up to Cameron Lang and say something like,
"If it rains, you'll be the first to know."
Mitch Nevitt played well in the twos. Until I see it, I'm not expecting this team to make a bunch of changes. I would also really like to get the email, Cats win 20% off at the Cats shop instead of just wrapping up the round. So please win. I give them about a 40 to 45% chance.
I give them 1-3.
I think they'll be up for this one, though. I think after last week, they'll be up for it. I feel like every week, if there was a sickos game of the week, it would have to be the Saints game. And I mean, it's tough because, unlike college football where you have like 50 to 60 games, we're choosing from 9. But between that and the state of things at Port, this has to be the sickos game of the week, right?
North of the Bulldogs could turn sickos, but when you look at things on paper, yeah, it's the Saints and Power under the roof. They've had some fun matchups going Port's way as of late, as the Power have won 5 straight head-to-head since 2020 and 13 of 14 since 2012, and they desperately need to break through the Ross Ball setup, as in 8th place and having been clounced by Brisbane, they need answers, and they need them quickly, and not just potentially for the coaches to save their hide.
This could be pretty fun if you're an underbetter. You have a Saints team that doesn't allow points and a Port team that, for all their talent, has struggled frequently to break 75. This could be pretty ugly, which is funny because usually, win or lose, we definitely don't think of Port as playing ugly games.
I think you could classify the round 7 meeting as ugly simply from the fact that Port kicked 1 goal 8 for the first quarter. And despite that, they were able to right things from there and led for most of the game from the late second quarter on. Despite being bagged up, Jason Horne-Francis
Here he is again, the horny one.
Finished out the game really well. That was also the game where Jack Higgins got suspended. It was for the dangerous tackle against Alir. So we'll see if maybe there could be a bit of spite there coming from that.
Courtesy of Cinch Footy, Zach Butters is now the second most fined player of all time.
Behind Toby Green?
Yep. And only behind him by $2,475.
Bring back the points. Butters should be suspended.
I was surprised to see Jai Simpkins so high on that list. That was a strange one.
There are some incidents where it just goes straight to the 5,000 or 10,000 mark. So maybe there was something in there. But fact of the matter is, it's ridiculous that after 4 separate rough conduct sightings, the most that the league could do at this point is say, hey, that's another 10,000 out of your paycheck. At some point, you got to actually sit the fuckers down.
Good news for the Saints is they should be much healthier. Remember, they didn't have Nasiah Wanganeen-Millera for that loss to the Lions before the bye. And honestly, from an offensive standpoint, it was their best game of the year.
They actually broke 100, but they also gave up 100. It was 126 to 106, I believe.
Something like that. Zane Cordy, I would think he's a likely one to get dropped, considering he got subbed out. And it was like the first time I had noticed him all game was when they showed him on the bench because he was subbed out.
I imagine that they'd be backing in Ari Schoenmaker for a second game, and hopefully his defensive instincts are better. We know what he can do in terms of rebound. He's a great left-footed kick. That was on display early. It's a matter of being able to support Cal Wilkie and Josh Battle.
What's a battle?
Sounds like the Hawks are trying to level a 6-year deal for Battle.
I don't think Battle's that great, but
he can play off a main defender and not a super big one pretty well. If you're looking for someone like really be able to play off James Sisley, as Sam Frost is likely on his way out within a year or two, I can see that. The Power should be getting Travis Boak and Willie Rioli back. I guess now we know more about why Yvonne Soldo was out last week.
Well, so it was listed as omitted.
Looking back, it looks like there were already some rumblings about a knee issue for him. And yeah, it's serious stuff. Scar tissue that no one wishes they saw.
Does it actually look really nasty or something?
Red Hot Chili Peppers, Ethan.
It's not like they have a lot of great performers down in the twos, considering the Sandville team got whacked.
Yeah, they lost to Norwood by more than the AFL side did to Brisbane. I saw there was a really funny one there where Port didn't actually rush it behind and it just laid to rest on the line, and Norwood picked it up, and that started a huge run where I think they scored a dozen of the next 14 goals.
Sounds like they've been watching Geelong.
Very Port happenings right now. If there's anybody there in the twos to bring up, Dylan Williams would be the one. I don't know how you manage everything there. There are a few magnets to move, but with Jace Burgoyne out with a hamstring injury, Williams could be an easy in there. Seeing how they use him in comparison and in contrast with Logan Evans could be a wash there, because Logan's got to get a second game. Yeah, after being maybe the most active defender in terms of moving the ball.
It is funny that he wasn't even the best Logan who was Rising Star eligible in that game, but he was good.
The Saints are 3.5 point favorites. That is not something I would have expected to see.
I'll still back in to win this game.
Between the head-to-head, the motivation, and the fact that this is a team that can break through Ross Ball.
Although I do think they are missing a couple guys who would really help in Powell Pepper and Burgoyne.
Burgoyne has some similarities in his game to Nazaya, actually. And so I was hoping to really be able to focus on that again, but I guess I'll have to wait.
You telling me they're not going to play each other in a final this year?
Fuck, you're right.
What sort of ridiculous thing will you do if these teams play each other in a final? Because I feel like, I'm not one to make ridiculous promises like walking to a city that's very far away. But I feel like the improbability of not only both of these teams making finals, but then getting lined up in a final, I feel like you can promise something pretty absurd. But it has to be something you can actually do.
Amputation of my left arm at the shoulder.
No, it needs to be something like that you would actually follow through on. Ooh, I got it. Because it's especially relevant right now and not totally out of date. The Cinnamon Challenge.
Challenge accepted. That could actually be really harmful for an asthmatic like me, so please don't.
If the Saints win, I think Hinkley watch goes up to like a 10.
And going into this game, I'm just on Hagen's watch in terms of the Saints, because he is super high up in terms of score generation. And with Port's defense being thinner and susceptible to being broken by Smalls, it could be a profitable game for Jack. The Jack wearing number 1. The Saints have a lot of Jacks.
Which other team has a bunch of players named Jack?
Hawthorne has a couple.
Okay, then I guess when the Saints play the Hawks, that game can be the Jack off. Here's a question. We haven't had a coaching change yet this season. Which league will have one first? Major League Baseball or the AFL?
Major League Baseball, because Port's board is stubborn.
Any guesses on which team for baseball? Because I think it's pretty obvious who the leader is.
The Mets can do Mets things, whatever, but...
John Schneider, Toronto.
I have gone a while without even thinking about the Jays, and I think that's pretty alarming in itself.
When I tipped this round, I think, like 7 games in favor of the visiting team, although, a decent amount of these are effectively neutral games, including this one, which the visiting team will be heavily favored in. Richmond taking on Carleton at the G. Tigers coming off their bye. Blues beat Geelong last Friday. Richmond's down in 17th. Carleton's in 2nd. Your normal big midday Sunday slot. 3:20 p.m. locally, 1:20 a.m. on the East Coast, and 10:20 p.m. Saturday on the West Coast.
And in a very typical fashion, that middle Sunday game is the Fox Sports 2 one. It's pretty common at this point for that Sunday Channel 7 broadcast to be on Fox 2. It'll be the 30th straight head-to-head meeting at the MCG for these two, and that goes back to 2007. Might be hard to remember at this point, but the Tigers led after each of the first 3 quarters in the round 1 meeting this year. The Blues just keep being that close win merchant. They kicked 3 goals, 6 in the second, so while it felt like they should have been ahead for a while, they just weren't.
I mostly remember Nick Lostone being awesome in that game and being like the most obvious polished turd maybe of the entire year. There have been a couple other games where there's been like one obvious awesome player. He was phenomenal that night.
Well, when it comes to defense, we'll start with this. We may have seen the end of Dylan Grimes already with his knee surgery sidelining him for the rest of the year.
On one hand, he has looked totally washed. On the other, he's only 32. What Richmond should do is give him the option to come back, but in what would definitely be a minimized role. He deserves the clarity and for the club to be forthcoming and say, we'd like to have you back, but you'd be lucky to play in more than like 8 to 10 games, which is similar to how I would like to see Geelong treat things with Zach Tuohy.
I find it hard to see other defensive changes for the Tigers. There's been an idea floated around that maybe Jacob Blight the midseason pickup could enter into defense with Samson Ryan out. Noah Balta may be sliding forward.
I am so opposed to the idea of taking Noah Balta out of the defense because he's been really good.
Noah Balta and Nick Fostone are the central figures of that defense. And if you take out one, it neuters the whole group so much. One of the players in who I'm the most interested on the other side for Richmond is Kane McAuliffe. Always starts off his time on the ground really well. Can keep it up for at least 2 quarters, but very rarely more than 3. He was effective as the sub the past couple weeks. I remember him helping close out that win back home in Adelaide exceptionally well. So we'll see where he gets his opportunities, whether it's right away or as the substitute for the 3rd game in a row.
This is a situation where if the team was in a better position, I would say keep him in the sub role. But considering where the team is, you have like no incentive not to just play him. It's not a, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's like, give him a shot, see if he can grow into a bigger role. Carlton should be getting Adam Chera.
Not Wolf.
Back this week, which, as if they needed help. More interesting question is, what do you do with Mark Pittonet? Because Tom de Koning was really, really good the last few weeks. Not that he had much of a challenge last week, but it's like, do you disturb that? Because de Koning has played better without Pittonet, but I think I would still advocate for bringing him in because ruck is the most likely position for someone to get injured. And if Tom de Koning gets hurt and Pittonet's not in there, who's your main ruckman? I guess then it would be...
Harry Mackay.
Yeah, would it just be Harry?
I would keep Pittonet out still. I think it's a great game considering how heavily the Blues are favored here, 40.5 points. I think it's a great test for de Koning, seeing if he can cut it against just one of those big fucking dudes.
I get that. I don't know if I do it, but I get it. I don't think the 40.5 point line is proper here. I would take Richmond to keep this a good bit closer. Like, lose by more like 4 to 5 goals. I would probably set this at like 26.5. And the biggest reason is I think coming off a bye, they'll be ready to play a better game because outside of Tim Taranto, they were not good last time out. It'll be another big crowd of the G.
I don't think it'll be 92,000.
No, but I think they'll be up. And most importantly, beyond that, they look a hell of a lot better when Jacob Hopper's in. So hopefully he can actually, stay healthy. That would be great.
So many opportunities for players to come back in for Carlton, with Jesse Montlock being the one in which I think we're both the most interested. His situation, along with Jack Martin, is a complicated one because, by no fault of his own,
Orazio Fantasia
was the one to make way. If there is a game where you do try to shake things up and make some bigger changes, I think now's the time. And the change I would make is give Jesse the green light again.
Maybe this is a game where you just manage some dudes
that quickly again after a bye.
I mean, I guess this team does have a lot of opportunities to do it, but I would like to see, look, you've got so many guys that are candidates for spots, especially as this team gets healthy. So it's tough.
Round 16 will end with what I guess is the Sam Mitchell game.
Oh, I was just going to say, put a bird on it.
That too, but remember, Sam Mitchell spent the last year of his playing career and the first year of his coaching career out west, and I think in hindsight, people are seeing just how important he was to putting on the finishing touches for that 2018 Premiership team for the Eagles. So that'll be 4:40 p.m. Australian Eastern Time, 2:40 p.m. Western Time. This is a pretty normal time slot to see the end of the round in WA. For Americans, 2:40 a.m. Eastern Sunday morning, 11:40 p.m. Pacific Saturday night. The 16th place Eagles, who stuck around with Essendon for a while against the 13th place Hawks, who were at 500 and were definitely spoilers of the Dusty 300 party their last time out. This is the first time they'll be meeting out west since 2020, and I do not want to think about that meeting from last year. That was just ugly stuff there. The Eagles scored 26 points for the game, and there was no valid explanation to me for why things just didn't click. Then pure tanking. The Eagles took one mark inside 50 for the entire game. Of course, it was Oscar Allen.
I actually have an explanation. No passion, no vision, no aggression, no mindset.
or just a sign of things to come for Hawthorne?
I get the weird feeling. Actually, I don't think it's that weird a feeling. I kind of like the Eagles here. Like, I'm going to still tip the Hawks, but I can see the Eagles winning this. I mean, I don't see Hawthorne as a team that's done especially well traveling out west, coming off a bye, slows their momentum. They're due for a down game at some point. If you're going to like the Eagles to win, it's going to be at home. I could see Tyler Brockman getting up for this. And the biggest thing is just you're getting Harley Reid and Tim Kelly back. You can just underthink that aspect of it.
This is going to be fun. Harley Reid and Tim Kelly up against the gauntlet that is the emerging Hawthorne midfield. Right now, by the way, 71% of tipsters on the AFL site are taking Hawthorne. I would have expected that number to be a bit higher.
Yeah, I think 71% is fair.
And yes, the Eagles are getting back those two big ones there. With those two now in, you can just add to the rotation there, especially with Reid, because last week, I liked that the Eagles kept moving around pieces in the center bounds. It kept the team fresh as a whole. And in a development year like this, it's good to just see what works. And one of the big things that worked was Liam Ryan getting out the front of center bounces. So more of that with a bit of a forward pocket split as well. Maybe him and Harley Reid alternating more there.
If you're Hawthorne, I assume you rotate guys on Reid, but if you were to give one guy the Reid assignment, which one guy would it be? Because I don't think there's an obvious answer.
I think a rotation makes sense because you've also got to deal with Tim Kelly and Elliot Yeo. And I think it's really important for Hawthorne to keep the size in there between Connor Nash and Jai Newcomb. I think we could just get some mammoth collisions. Am I crazy to say James Worpel?
I would think either Worpel or Newcomb goes to Kelly, and then maybe you have Day and Nash alternate on Reid. I especially like it with Nash because you worry less about the number of touches he gets compared to the others.
What about Elliot Yeo?
Probably split up. Whichever one doesn't get Kelly, probably. I think I'd go Newcomb to Yeo, Worpel to Kelly. Yeah. And with body types, I think that makes the most sense.
The steadiest players all year for the Eagles have been Tom Barras and Jeremy McGovern, particularly McGovern. They are going to be challenged big time.
Here's the problem that I think the Eagles defense could encounter. You've got good intercept markers, but I see Hawthorne generating a lot of success out of like shorter entries and quick handball chains and stuff like that, where I don't think you're going to have too many times where they just go after McGovern and Barras. Although maybe, that's where Cal Sherdier is definitely going to get tested. But I think the bigger issue is how do you stop like the ground level stuff, the Dylan Moore stuff?
The Dylan Moore stuff, the pushes from Massimo D'Ambrosio, the Jack Ginnivan stuff there too. Yeah, that's going to be a real challenge. And I think a lot of that is going to fall on young Brady Hough, who I think is fantastic. And other people are starting to see it too. But he often gets pretty limited support back there in terms of playing against the smalls. That's one of the biggest issues that the Eagles defense has had all year. And Essendon managed to work around it because Hough started out on Jake Stringer, and they had Stringer be that extra in the middle, and that confounded matchups where they kept him off of Brady Hough. So maybe if you have Jack Ginnivan push into the center bounce sometimes, because I feel like Ginnivan could be a pretty logical matchup for Hough. I think that could disrupt things a lot. Or do we just have the youngsters go up against each other, Hough and Watson?
If the Hawks were not also coming off a bye, it would be so easy to just say you're resting Jack Gunston after he had like one disposal last time out and then got subbed out. But yeah, I think this game is going to kind of rely some on like Nick Watson and Dylan Moore because, again, I trust McGovern and Barras against the likes of Deere and Mabior Chol, who I hadn't mentioned until now. And he had been on a nice little run of games before the bye. Hawks favored by 13.5, and despite seeing a world in which the Eagles could win this, if the Hawks win, I see it being by a few more points. I don't know, something like the 16 to 20 range. I can also see the Eagles doing what they've done a few times this year at home and just win by like 5 goals.
I'm seeing Hawthorne by 5 or 6 goals. As much of an Eagles fan as I am, as much as I can see successes, I think the defensive issues could very easily be too much to overcome.
I could see a lot of this game riding on Nick Watson's accuracy, and I would back him in for main character, but I've got a different pick. But I'll let you go first, Benjamin. Who's your main character pick for this week?
You know, we've had some ground invasions this year, including by the brother of a currently AFL listed player. I think this week it's not going to be anybody getting on the ground, but it's going to be somebody throwing something on the ground. Maybe the Sharon goes into the crowd, and instead of throwing a Sharon, somebody just like tosses their pie or something like that on the ground instead.
I was thinking, just like the typical paper airplane, like you see at soccer games all the time. But I like that. I also like the idea of, how like if you catch a home run, you're supposed to throw back a ball, but smart people have like a decoy ball to throw back. You got like a decoy Sharon. You brought your own Sharon and wrote a funny message on it.
Who you got, Ethan?
Me. I'm backing myself in. I'm the main character.
We're all the main character in our own story.
I am the main character this week.
You could have been a candidate last week as we got some hoes mad, especially some parent ones.
This is my week. This is my moment. All right, you know the drill. Twitter, Americans Footy. We're on Instagram. We're on YouTube.
Keep up with the Polished Turd because we'll be giving live updates on that. America's Brownlow, though, will obviously wait until the big night. Individually, Benjamin HK01 for me, Castle Media for him, Cat Named Grind on Instagram for my nephew, who I miss very much and look forward to seeing in about a month and a half.
He's just sitting here attentively right now.